one of the Tuesday, Thursday. In theory, it is the Live at 5 stream with me streaming some of my own games, though in this case it's a little after 5. Kind of lost track of time there, sorry. I'm new to the whole keeping a schedule thing. But we have some cool stuff coming here. These are more of the recordings that I have saved from the Flesh and Blood West Coast Playtest Tournament. So there was a multiple week West Coast Playtest League that was put on. It was sponsored by Fab Foundry, and this is going to be one of the games that I played in that event. I already have streamed, I believe, 3 games from that event, maybe 4. I don't recall the specific number that I've gotten to already, but this is a new one. This is myself playing Dorinthia versus TegaFoet playing Brute here. So yeah, this is going to be Dorinthia versus Reinar, and I believe, I'm not totally sure, but I believe this was the last round of Swiss. So I think that at this point I was, I think there were either 4 or 5 rounds of Swiss, and at this point I think I was 2, yeah, I think it was 4 rounds of Swiss, and at this point I was 2-1, having won 2 games that were already streamed, 1 against Warrior and 1 against Wizard, and having lost 1 game against Jake's Guardian deck. I'm now trying to ensure that I can get a spot in the top cut by hopefully winning this game, and we'll see how it goes for me. Okay, so with that aside, let's get this video on the road. We've started up here. Okay, so a brief overview of this matchup, Dorinthia versus Reinar in Classic Constructed. So in this situation, generally speaking, I think that as the warrior player, you want to try and kill your opponent and be fairly aggressive, but you have to watch out for potential big intimidate combos. So in this case, my opponent gets a breakneck battery here, and it is going to have go again, I believe, which is going to intimidate another cards. Then this is coming in for 6, and it's buffed by that yellow barraging beatdown, so I have to block with 2 cards or else I am going to take big damage. And however, I do in fact have 2 cards to block with, so all that really does is make me block with, to be fair, valuable cards. You know, Steelblade Supremacy, not necessarily the thing I most wanted to block with there necessarily, but I am able to ward that off, and he doesn't really have anything to do with his go again. He had 1 energy floating, but that isn't enough to swing the club because the club does, of course, cost 2. I'm going to come in with a Ravenous Rabble. It does hit a route. That's nice. It's a little lucky to hit a red. I have a better than 50% chance to hit it in this deck. More than half my cards are reds in this build, but it's you know, you still do have that chance to hit a yellow or blue and get reduced damage. So I am coming in for 4 with go again, which is good because even if my opponent blocks with a card here, he's still probably going to take some damage unless he wants to use a defense reaction against it or use some of his equipment. And honestly, I'm totally fine with an opponent using a defense reaction or using equipment against a attack of this type, because this just isn't really something that I'm that concerned about. It isn't one of my most important things. It's not going to stop my important on-hit effects. Yeah, it's one of those things. And so my opponent can block this with a card, but you know, we'll have to see exactly what's happening here. And they're basically, the choice here is, do you want to just take damage or do you want to block with a card and preserve life total? So in general, if you have something strong to do on your own turn, you might want to just take damage and come back with some aggression of your own, but it comes at the cost of you're going to be feeling some heat here. So I'm looking at what I have. I have an E-Strike, I have a Blue Overpower, and I have an Iron Song Determination. So that's like sort of an awkward hand. I think what I end up doing might be E-Strike go again into a swing. I'm not entirely sure. The problem is E-Strike 7 and Arsenal a card would be pretty good, but neither of those cards, the Iron Song Determination or the Overpower, are things that I actually want to have in my arsenal. And the reason is the Iron Song Determination is kind of an endgame play. And then the Overpower is also, it's very expensive. It's usually only played if you have a lot of resources, and it tends to be a good pitch because then late in the game you can set yourself up to get in a situation where where you can have more blues there and can pitch it more easily. So I do end up going for the go again into a swing. And then my opponent is just going to take the 3 damage there. They did block the Enlightened Strike, but I still got 7 damage through. Now they're going to throw a club swing at me, just coming in for 4. And looking at my hand here, I have what could be a fairly aggressive hand. I have the Overpower, and so I could pitch the Overpower swing, potentially play the Razor Reflex and or the Singing Steel Blade, depending on what my opponent does in the defense. The one problem with this is that I don't have anything that's going to naturally give me Go Again. And because I don't have anything that's naturally going to give me Go Again, there is sort of that risk that I won't be able to be all that aggressive. So I end up taking the hit from his swing on my Refraction Bolters. And the reason that I do that is I'm thinking, if I end up using these Refraction Bolters early on, I want to make sure that I've gotten value out of them by using them to defend. So now, because I know that I have this turn where I have some good attack reactions for the offense, but I don't have a Go Again, I take the damage on my Refraction Bolters, my opponent doesn't block, and then I use the Refraction Bolters to get that Go Again so that now I can come in more aggressively. So then I use my Braveforge Bracers and swing again for 4, so that's going to make this a little harder to defend against, depending on whether or not my opponent has a defense reaction here. Now, let's see here. So, in this situation, we're looking at the... my opponent's looking at this Dawnblade swing. It's coming in for 4. If it hits, I am going to get a +1 counter. The +1 counter on Dawnblade is generally a very important thing to stop if you're playing against a warrior. But I also have 3 cards in hand. I don't have any energy floating, which somewhat limits what I could have, but there's still definitely the chance that I'm going to have some aggressive attack reactions, which in fact I do have, looking at my hand. So we'll see exactly what he does. So he puts out a CNC to block with and then takes it back. That does, however, tell me that he has a Command and Conquer in his hand, so that's like a minor error. He ends up going for a block of 6, blocking with I believe that was a Pack Hunt and a Wrecker Romp. So currently he's over blocking me by 2, but because I used the bracers, I'm actually at attack strength 4, so I can go over his overblock by 1 by using this Razor Reflex. He then plays a defense reaction from Arsenal, a Springboard Somersault to counter. He wastes a lot of the block, but he does prevent me from getting the counter. And then I go on to Arsenal that copy of Singing Steel Blade. So then he's going to come in with a Command and Conquer that he accidentally showed me. So I'm thinking about my hand here. So let's see what's in this hand. So I have 2 copies of Scar for a Scar. I can't play them with Go Again because my opponent has more life than me, so that's awkward. I also can't actually block very effectively because I have 3 cards that block for 2. Now I could still block it out. I could use 2 of the cards from my hand and some of my equipment. The other thing though is that the card that's in Arsenal is not actually that valuable. So I end up deciding to just take a hit. This is not going to be a very strong turn for me, unfortunately. I actually wish that I were lower life at this time, because if I were under my opponent's life total, this hand would actually be quite strong with those copies of Scar for a Scar, but unfortunately they've come up in a situation where it's going to be a lot less practical. I could use this Snatch, where if it hits, it will go again. I could just swing Dawnblade or something. I do end up going for a Snatch there, coming in at strength 4. If it hits, I will draw a card. It doesn't have a Go Again, unfortunately, but the card draw could get me a card that I would rather have in Arsenal than what I currently have, and it's a little awkward to defend against. Also, this play signals that I might have a Razor Reflex. Normally, you wouldn't want to play a Snatch and just end your turn. So the way that I'm playing it might make my opponent think that I have a Razor Reflex coming to give it +3 and Go Again on hit, in which case he might like overblock it heavily. I would be really happy if he overblocked 7 here, but I don't think he's going to do it. I think he just blocks with 1 card. And that means that, so I end up doing 1 damage. I do draw a card, and I actually get lucky here and draw a Springboard Somersault, which is a card that really benefits from being in Arsenal. So the card draw from that Snatch actually did benefit me, even though I wasn't able to play anything, and I would have been able to draw up anyway, because it gave me a much better card to put in my Arsenal, rather than the card that I originally had there. Okay, so now we're going to see a Romping Club swing coming in. So Romping Club swung there for 4 damage, and I decide this time I want to just take the hit because it's going to enable those Scar for a Scars that I have in hand. I could have blocked that. I could have countered it with the defense reaction, but I'm like, no, I'm going to take this hit, dip under him in life total, and that's going to make his Skullcap weaker, and it's also going to let me play Scar for a Scar with the Go Again effect. So he takes four damage from the first scar. I actually would have preferred to see him block, both because it would get a card out of his hand and because it would mean that I could then play the second scar and come in with go again. But of course, he did not let me do that, sadly for me. So then I'm going to just come in here with a Dawnblade Swing. And unfortunately, I don't have a way to give it go again. So in this case, it ends up just cutting in for 3 damage. I have dealt 7 damage, but my opponent now can potentially have a big turn coming. This is something that's pretty dangerous. Against Brute, if they do a really big turn, they can intimidate a lot of cards out of your hand and come in for a lot of damage. I am definitely considerably ahead on life. You know, I'm ahead by 5 life, but because of the risk of big intimidates doing damage that's hard to defend against, that can be deceptive. You really don't want to get too low against a Brute because it does give them that chance to get you with a huge turn. So I'm a little not impressed by the turn that I just had. I wish I had been able to do more. NVS 1UP, thanks for the follow, much appreciated. Also Mythine, who followed me earlier today. Okay. And meanwhile, we have the... What's going on exactly in this game? We have the card Intimidated, and he's coming in with just the club. So this is something that you're going to want to block with 2 cards to prevent the Barraging Beatdown. So Barraging Beatdown is one of Brute's strongest cards, usually a 9 of, where you're going to run all of it in all colors. What it does is it makes it so that if you block with... unless you block... And I had to also block with things that I would prefer not to have blocked with because of the specific way that the... intimidates removed cards. I would have liked to block. I would have liked to keep that Spoils of War in particular, but I wasn't able to keep it. So if I had been able to block a little differently, it might have been to my advantage. Although I could have used the I could have used the Springboard Somersault, but I opted to save that in case he has something even bigger. Having a defense reaction in Arsenal that you can play without paying any cost, or with a cost that you can pay for with a potion or with Tunic or something, can be very good against Brute, because sometimes they're going to intimidate all your cards except 1 and then come in, and you won't be able to stop Barraging Beatdown because you won't be able to defend with 2 non-equipment cards unless you have a defense reaction in Arsenal, in which case you will be able to stop it. So then my opponent is going to go for just a very basic play, just another beatdown club. So I'm thinking... in this situation, I'm thinking I peek at my card there to make sure it's a card that I can use to trigger my flock of the Feather Walkers. And the reason that I'm thinking about that, at least I think that's what I'm doing. It's also possible that I'm going to do something like a Steelblade Shunt, but I think I end up going for flock here, though I could be wrong. Or no, it's complicated, because if I block... Yeah, it's weird, because if I block the flock, I have to... I use the Somersault, that's right. So flock has to reveal a card as part of its cost, so I can't... if I only have 2 cards in hand, I can't play it unless I have my Tunic up, and to use that Shunt, which was the only non-flock card that I could have blocked with to get 2 blocks out, I would have had to use my Tunic, and then I wouldn't have had it for Shunt. And then I wouldn't have had it for flock, so instead I have to use the defense reaction in Arsenal in what I would consider a not optimal way, but it allows me to get some more tempo back on my own turn. And at that time I was kind of losing some tempo, so being able to come back in with a flock of the Featherwalkers, this is going to come in for 5 damage, which is not all that much in terms of damage, but it's enough that the opponent might well want to block it, and if they don't, they're going to take they're going to lose a solid chunk of health. And if they do block it, it reduces their tempo, and then additionally it's going to give me a powerful option for the future by giving me that go again from the Quicken token. My opponent double blocks it, which I'm really happy to see. And now my next turn, I know I have this go again from the Quicken token, I have my Tunic charged up, and I have the Iron Song response in Arsenal, even though my opponent knows that it's there because I did have to reveal it. He's just going to come in for a simple club swing, so I'm thinking, this is an opportunity to potentially get in there and retake tempo, do some aggressive plays. Looking at my hand, one thing that I could easily do is that I could do an E-Strike draw card, which would then also have go again thanks to the Quicken token. So that would come in for 5, and it would give me more options for the rest of the turn. Another thing that I could do is I could swing, start off with a Dawnblade swing and then play that copy of Hit and Run that I have in hand, which is a yellow Hit and Run to give my next attack +2 and go again. So then that could buff the E-Strike even further if I played the E-Strike afterwards, or I could use it with another Dawnblade swing if the first one got in with that Iron Song response. I really have a lot of options for how to do this turn. I end up deciding that I want to go for the E-Strike 5. I think this is E-Strike 5, draw a card, but it might be E-Strike 7. E-Strike 5, draw a card. Nice, yeah, and I hit a Ravenous Rebel, which I'm going to be able to throw out there for yet another attack. So this right now is looking like something appealing for me in terms of getting a lot of tempo back. That Quicken token is really enabling me to do a lot. So my opponent shows me a Fate Foreseen, then kind of rethinks it, but then he does play it. So you want to be sure of your card before you drag it out onto the table in Tabletop Simulator. And the reason that I say that is because giving your opponent some information can at times just be really costly. I then do come in with the Ravenous Rabble. It reveals a yellow hit and run, so it's just coming in for 3. But that is going to be either some damage or another card out of my opponent's hand. You know, ideally you hit the red and you come in for 4 and damage them even if they do a standard block. And then I'm going to pitch this and Dawnblade swing for 3, and I have that Glint the Quicksilver to give it go again and potentially draw me a card as well. And I know that I also have that, I believe it is a red Iron Song response in Arsenal, so if he blocks with 1 card, I can get over his block. It's this is definitely a situation that I'm pretty happy about. You know, I'm managing to do a very aggressive turn here. And, you know, my opponent might not block and hope that I don't have Glint, but then I can play Glint, use my bracers, and swing again for 4, and still have that that attack reaction waiting. So I've managed to retake a lot of tempo, even though I had some slow turns earlier. At this point, I feel like I've really started to make a comeback in terms of the overall position in the game. And you might say, like, why would he say make a comeback? Like, he wasn't behind. And I think that there's, you know, I was ahead on life the whole time, but there's an important sense in which I was behind, which was the tempo situation from me getting those unaggressive turns with the Scar for a Scars had led to situations where I was playing defensively. You know, I was having to block with multiple cards and then not doing something that effective when my opponent was pressuring me with those barraging beatdowns. But I was successfully able to use that defense reaction that I had in Arsenal to block with 2 cards without and still be able to play that flock. And now the flock is has really allowed me to do a much more aggressive turn. He doesn't block. I activate the Glint. If he has a defense reaction, he can stop me here, if he has a defense reaction in Arsenal in particular. But if he doesn't, I am going to be able to use my bracers and come in again for 4, which could be hugely threatening. So if he has defense, it's a really good time to play it. He does, unfortunately for me, has a Sink Below, plays it from Arsenal. But honestly, I'm not that unhappy about this. I still managed to get I believe just 1 point of damage through, but I managed to get a lot of cards out of his hand, and now his next turn, you know, maybe he's just going to do another one of those barraging beatdown plays. It's totally possible that it could happen, but it's also possible that he doesn't have that option, and because he is down so many cards, he's going to have to play it less aggressively. So I'm looking at my hand here. I see that I have a Springboard Somersault in hand. I have a hit and run as well, so I could potentially pitch the Somersault, play hit and run, swing Dawnblade, and I have a good attack turn, so I decided to take the damage. And it's a little risky to go down to like below 20 versus Brute. Once you're at about 20, you start being in like a danger zone where if the opponent does a really strong combo, they can potentially get you. I'm a little more confident in this case because I also have good armor. And so I go for a hit and run Dawnblade swing. So this is 3 with unconditional go again. I still have that attack reaction, the Iron Song response in Arsenal, and also I'm going to be able to use Tunic or pitch a card to play Command and Conquer if this does get stopped. So my opponent blocks for 3, and I play the Iron Song response to go up to 6. So I'm now going to hit him for 3, and if he doesn't have a defense reaction here, he does have a defense reaction, so he ends up doing that, and then I go in even harder with the Razor Reflex that I also have in hand. So I'm now at like I'm now at strength 9. He has another defense reaction in his hand, so he is able to stop this, but then I'm just going to Arsenal CNC. And you might say, why did you play that Razor Reflex instead of going for the CNC? The answer is because he didn't have because he no longer had any cards in Arsenal, the Command and Conquer was going to be a lot less effective, so I decided, you know, at this point it might be better to save this Command and Conquer and use it later, rather than necessarily just playing it for the damage and maybe knocking some cards out of hand, but maybe just doing damage and not threatening Arsenal. So I'm looking through his Arsenal now and looking for his defense reactions. I type in Sink and Somersault and Fate because those are the ones that I think he's using. I also look for Unmovables, though he hasn't played any. And I see that he has played, I believe it was 2 Sinks, 2 Springboard Somersaults, 1 Fate Foreseens, that's 5. So if he isn't running the Unmovables, he probably only has 4 defense reactions left, if that. It's important when you're playing Warrior to have a sense of how much defense your opponent might have left and how tricky they can essentially be. Just so that you have a good idea of what to be watching out for when you do your attacks, especially as you weigh their attack reactions versus your defense reactions. Inner Coilote, thanks for the follow, much appreciated. But now we're back on my opponent's turn here, and it looks like he's in a slightly awkward spot. He actually has to use his Tunic and pitch I believe it's an Alpha Rampage, just to come in with a club swing here for 4. That's not really what you would typically want to. That's not really what you would typically want to do. You know, using Tunic for a club swing is awkward, and I end up blocking it with a Twinning Blade that I had in hand, just because that's not going to be that relevant here. So then on my turn, I'm going to once again try out I'm trying for the hit and run Dawnblade into Command and Conquer combo, which is just a very solid play from Warrior. It can be very difficult for an opponent to deal with. So let's see exactly what happens here as I come in with hit and run on the Dawnblade. My opponent goes for a single block. I don't have an attack reaction, so I just say, okay, so be it. And now the question is, do I play this with Tunic or do I pitch the CNC to play that CNC? And I think the answer is that I just use Tunic, yep, because using the Tunic here means that I can keep this card in Arsenal and keep up kind of the little card advantage and pressure. So now I'm threatening 6 damage to my opponent. If he takes the damage, he could take the damage, but if he takes the damage, he's going to lose the card that he has in Arsenal. And if he blocks the damage, which would require him to use at least 1 card, and he could only block it with 1 card if he used both of his armors as well, then he would be in a position where he would still be down at least 1 card from hand. So no matter what he does, I'm going to destroy at least 1 card here. And that's one of the benefits of Command and Conquer. It can really put a tough choice for your opponent, and it can really get you some almost guaranteed tempo, because in most situations there's nothing someone can do that is going to allow them to not lose at least 1 card, whether that be a card that's used to block with or a card that's knocked out of Arsenal by the card effect. Command and Conquer is one of the strongest cards in the game. It might be the strongest card in the game. Or at least the strongest, like, non-equipment or something like that. I believe there was a recent evaluation that indicated that Command and Conquer was the most played card in tournament-winning deck lists, and that a very large majority of tournament-winning deck lists are playing Command and Conquer at this time. So I think it's definitely a strong option for a lot of characters. There are some that can use it better than others. I personally feel that Warrior makes very good use of Command and Conquer when you're doing this sort of wide unconditional go again tactic that I like to employ here, because you can do plays like this where I'm doing one sort of attack at first, my opponent responds to that, and then I have the Command and Conquer coming in once they've already used the card they most want to block with, and making the decision even harder. And in some situations, you know, you might see your opponent over blocking the Dawnblade swing because they're afraid of an attack reaction, and then Command and Conquer can just hit them so hard. In fact, if you watched, there's an earlier game that I played, and I streamed that on here. It was a game of mine against another player, Miko beat, I believe, in this tournament, where it was Warrior versus Warrior. And 2 different times in that game, I was in that situation where he's coming in with the Dawnblade. It has go again. I block with 2 cards because I'm worried about getting routed. And he ends up hitting me with a Command and Conquer afterwards and forcing out even more defense and just destroying my tempo. Just very difficult situation. I did end up prevailing in that game, but it was by a somewhat unusual method that if you guys want to watch that video, you can find out. I think it's in my VODs. I need to like make a better version of that video. There are a few issues at the start, but the end is really good, and I need to maybe make a cleaned up version of that video and put it on YouTube because it was a really interesting game. Okay, so my opponent is coming in with a barraging beatdown. Yellow beatdown into a club swing. So this is going to be, I think the yellow beatdown is +3 damage if I don't block with 2 cards. So 2 non-equipment cards. So I have a lot of blue in my hand. It's kind of an awkward situation. And so in this situation, I really don't want to take the damage. I also am in an unfortunate spot with that Flock of the Feather Walkers. I'm really not going to be able to play it. So I think what if me now does this, I think I block with Warrior's Valor and Flock, and then I pitch blue, swing Dawnblade, play Glint, and then play the other CNC. But we'll see if I chose to do that. That is what I chose to do. So the double block, stopping the barraging beatdown effect. I would have liked to play that Flock, but it wasn't in the cards because I didn't have my Tunic charged up, so it would have required me to keep 3 things, and I didn't want to take the extra damage since I am approaching the danger zone. Oh, okay. So instead of going for the Glint play, I end up going for the hit and run version. So I think that's fair. I think the having Glint for later in the game might be better. On the other hand, if I do the Glint version, there's the chance that I get a card draw out of it if my opponent does block this one. but then doing hit and run makes it more likely that he is going to block it instead of just letting it hit him. It's kind of complicated. Often the best thing to do against a potential glint is to just like make them play it without you playing any cards from your hand. And like the dream is like they swing Dawnblade at you, you say no defense, they sigh and play glint without triggering the reprise to get their card draw, and then you hit them with a defense reaction to shut down the attack anyway. So he used a CNC to block, and then I have my own CNC from Arsenal, the one that I saved on the previous turn, and now it's coming in for 6 damage and once again threatening his Arsenal card. This time we are going to see the full block, leaving him at just 1 card in hand and 1 in Arsenal. I don't have a card in Arsenal myself at this time, but it's going to be, I have regained a fair amount of tempo. Looking at my hand, this is a really strong, aggressive hand. I can pitch hit and run, play Spoils of War, swing Dawnblade for 3, and then play a Snatch. And that's really good. And so then, but he's right now threatening me for 4. And I think I decided to block with one of these copies of Snatch because I won't be able to play both. And even though this means that I might not have a card to Arsenal on my next turn, I like saving the damage, especially against Brute, who has those big combos. And it will also mean that the other Snatch will be a higher priority block, because Snatch is much better when you don't have a card in Arsenal, because then if it hits, it potentially gives you card advantage if the card that you draw is one that's worth putting in Arsenal, which can then, it just makes that on-hit effect scarier for the opponent. So I end up going for Spoils of War into Dawnblade Swing. Spoils of War are one of the best cards in the game, by the way. 3x auto include in Warrior in Constructed, in my opinion, and probably a 2x auto include in the Blitz format as well. It's just so good. So there's Hit and Run and Warrior's Valor. So Hit and Run only gives you bonus damage conditionally, but it gives you a go again all the time. Warrior's Valor gives you the bonus damage all the time, but only gives you the hit and run, go again conditionally. And Spoils of War is the best of both worlds, where it's going to give you both the bonus damage and the hit and run, and the go again unconditionally, and will allow you to set up just a very strong turn. So Spoils of War is one of the best cards. And then as kind of icing on the cake, Spoils of War also gives you an on-hit effect that lasts for your whole turn, where if you hit with a weapon, you get 2 copper tokens. The copper tokens themselves aren't always that valuable, but I've definitely encountered situations where I've used them. They allow you to spend 4 energy to draw a card. And so my opponent only blocks with 1 card. That means that Snatch hits him for 1. And then I draw a card, and it is a card that I like to see in Arsenal. So that's a great turn for me. That Snatch has gained a lot of tempo for me. And now it's going to be my opponent's turn. He's throwing out just another standard club swing. And so I'm looking at my hand. I can potentially let this hit me and then play that Scar for a Scar, and then do other cool aggressive stuff as well. So that is what I decide to do. I am definitely like far in the danger zone now, so it's a little risky. It might have been better under this situation to block with a card and just try to prevent from getting so low. But I do still have a lot of equipment block, which means that I'm not quite as low as it seems. Like if you're in this danger zone with no equipment, you're at risk of dying into just like a 1-turn combo. But at this point, I'm a little bit outside of the 1-turn instant death range, at least from kind of the smaller stuff, because I can potentially block. I could potentially block 5 with equipment if I use everything. Maybe 4 if my opponent goes to lower life than me. I should also possibly have used my Brave Forge Bracers already and or my Skullcap already, because the Brute generally doesn't have scary on-hit effects except for the Command and Conquer they're probably playing, and because of that, it can be useful to use equipment earlier. Z the Bee says, "Hey Tower, off topic, but do you have your latest list posted anywhere?" I have something that is very close to my latest list posted in the if you go to my blog TowerNumberNine.com, there's an article called I believe it's like a Flesh and Blood Evolution of a Warrior deck list, and that has an image of the most recent version of my deck. I believe, I'm not 100% confident, but I believe it has an image of either the most recent version or something that's close to the most recent version. So now I'm going to play Hit and Run, and then I'm going to play a I have Hit and Run, and then I have a Steelblade Supremacy into a Dawnblade Swing. So this is 5 with Go Again, and if it hits, draw a card. My opponent blocks with only 1 card, so I'm just going to pass. Presumably he has a defense reaction, because letting this Steelblade Supremacy in is like very imprudent. So I'm like, okay, you're going to block, you're going to block this for 3. Okay. Right now I'm going to hit you for 2, draw a card, and have Go Again for another Dawnblade Swing, so I'm okay with that. And then I think my opponent is figuring out what to do here with the defense. But, you know, in this sort of situation, you have to presume that the opponent is going to be in this sort of situation, you have to presume that the opponent is going to be playing something that is going to allow them to stop this attack. But there's not all that much for me to do right now. What I have set up here, though, is that on my I have that go again, and I can use my Tunic to go up to 2 energy and play that Command and Conquer to threaten even more damage. And if he still has a card in Arsenal at that time, I can potentially break the card in Arsenal as well, though I think there's a good chance it's a defense reaction that he's about to play to stop me from hitting him, and it is, of course. So that's going to stop me from hitting him with the Steelblade Supremacy, which will prevent me from getting the card draw. At this time, I can choose to either use the Tunic and play CNC or Arsenal it. Because the life totals are so low, I decided to just put on even more pressure, just trying to threaten him with even more damage this turn and hopefully knock some cards out of his hand and break up his tempo further, because I really don't want to be taking more damage when I'm this low against a Brute, even with the armor still broadly intact. So I do end up using my Tunic to come in with the Command and Conquer instead of just arsenaling it. So my opponent now has to either take 6 damage or block with at least something, which will then put him in a worse position on tempo. He could block with just equipment if he wanted to, but that would be, you know, a different story. Let's see what ends up happening here. And I think this is, as you can see, you know, he's taking some time. He's thinking about stuff. He's looking at my discard pile to see what I have left. And, you know, I think often if your opponent's taking a bunch of time to figure out what to do against your attacks, that can be indicative that you're posing them some hard questions. And one of the benefits of playing as Warrior is that Warrior is probably the hardest class to defend against in the game, just because they have, especially this sort of like wide Warrior deck that can throw together a lot of different potential attack patterns. I think that it becomes very difficult for an opponent to figure out exactly what the best way to defend is, because they don't know what you're doing to attack. So, you know, in this turn I've done 3 different attacks. The first one was kind of just a filler, but it had go again. Then I had the powerful attack with Steelblade Supremacy that was a very high block priority, because it would potentially give me a card draw, go again, and then I could trigger Dorinthia's ability to swing Dawnblade yet again. And then I had the CNC on top of that, so super aggressive turn. And, you know, not only am I doing, you know, if you add up all the damage that I've presented here, I'm threatening 15 damage. And in addition to threatening 15 damage, I also have relevant on-hit effects. So very scary situation. My opponent does block with 1 card and with his Scabskin Leathers there. I'm happy about him blocking with his armor in a situation where it doesn't stop an on-hit effect, and then all he does is Arsenal and pass, which is going to give me an opportunity for some more aggression of my own, but I'm in a slightly rough position here, because if you look at the pitch value of my hand, it's very low. So I think that there's multiple things that I could potentially do here, but because it's an all-red hand, and I would really like to do the Warrior's Valor attack, threaten another attack with that Iron Song response, but I would need to have like a yellow to try to do that to the best of my ability. So I think I end up going with the Flock of the Featherwalkers here. Yep. So Flock of the Featherwalkers played. It can be a good card when you have an all-red hand. You just have to pitch 1 card and reveal something. Coming in for 5 damage, and it is going to give me a Quicken token, but if my opponent has like a huge combo here, this could be his opportunity to kill me. So this is a lot less aggressive than I would prefer. I think that, so if I'm in a situation now where my opponent has, you know, the big power in his hand, all he has to do is take this damage and then do his huge turn, because it's just damage, it's no on-hit effect, and there's nothing all that threatening about it. So the Flock of the Featherwalkers gets caught in the like end turn procedure there, and yeah. So I draw up. I have a pretty aggressive hand, but I'm gonna have to probably use some of it to defend with, and this is really not a situation that I like to be in. You know, I would have preferred to do a more aggressive turn last time, but I didn't quite have the energy. My opponent rolls the Scabskin Leathers here, and he rolls a 1, but he has his Gambler's Gloves, so he has the reroll. Rerolling his Scabskin Leathers, he gets a 3. So he doesn't just end. So if he just had to end right there, that would probably be game over because he just lost all his tempo that he just had, and I could come in with a huge turn. But because he played Gambler's Gloves, he does have the reroll, and the reroll means that even though this isn't going to be a multiple action turn, it's still going to be a turn where he can at least do something. So he can at least put some pressure on me. And that's why the Gambler's Gloves is a very important inclusion if you are going to be playing with Scabskin Leathers. And you intend to actually roll it. Now, if you intend to only use Scabskin Leathers as a last ditch, or you don't plan to roll it, then you don't really need the Gambler's Gloves. I know that Grendel, a person that I'm familiar with from the L5R community, who's had some good results in online play of Flesh and Blood, is I know that he has definitely been in a situation before where he's thinking, I'm just going to equip Goliath Gauntlet. Okay, so he fires off a Blood Rush Bellow here, and it hits a Beast Within. So Beast Within is this weird card where what it ends up doing is it's going to like mill his top cards, and every time he mills a card, he takes 1 damage. But then once he mills one that's a big attack, he draws it. So this is potentially giving him, it's going to hurt him even more, but it is going to give him some draws. Okay, so then he mills, the first card he mills is a Fate Foreseen, so he just takes damage. The second card he mills is a Barraging Bighorn. And so that one just goes into his hand. So now this is very scary for me. This could well be a kill turn here. He now has all his attacks are buffed up from the Blood Rush Bellow, and he does also have the opportunity to potentially just hit me really hard because he has a full hand and he could have more buffs. The one thing that I do have going for me that I really appreciate is that the Scabskin Leathers didn't give him multiple actions. If he was able to throw out a bunch of attacks this turn, this could very easily kill me. But even as it stands, if he has a bunch of copies of Barraging Beatdown, he could intimidate my hand and come in for the kill right here. But luckily for me, I do know that he's already played a bunch of his copies of Barraging Beatdown. But now we see another Intimidate coming in, so I only have 2 cards left in hand. That was an Awakening Bellow, and then he comes in with the Alpha Rampage, huge Intimidate. So, and it's going to discard, so that's going to intimidate the rest of my hand. So he gets a full Intimidate, and that's going to come in, I believe, for 13. So all I can do here is block with my equipment, and so I block with both of these. So I'm blocking 3. And normally you might not want to block with the Arcanite Skullcap here because because I am above my opponent in life, so I'm wasting the initial block. But it's really important that I not go down to 2, because at 2 I would get killed in 1 hit by Reckless Swing. So that was one of those really scary full Intimidate turns. And like I was discussing earlier, I was definitely low enough that I was like in range of potential death, and the thing that saved me was the fact that I still had my armor. So that huge attack isn't able to kill me or even put me into Reckless Swing range, and now I'm going to have to be very aggressive to try to get my tempo back after having it taken in that big situation. So I have 2 copies of Warrior's Valor. Both are red. I believe at the time of this tournament I was still playing blue Warrior's Valor, but I have changed it and I'm only playing the red ones now, not even the blues. And I think I go for double Warrior's Valor here, which is kind of silly. But I'm going for double Warrior's Valor Dawnblade. I have the Quicken token, so I have Go Again regardless of whether this hits, and I'm coming in for 9 damage. And the reason that I played the other Warrior's Valor is I want to, at 3 life, if my opponent gets like a big Intimidate combo again, I'm dead. There's just no way that I can stop it. Maybe if I have a defense reaction in Arsenal, maybe. But even then, I only have 3 life, 2 or 3 points of armor depending on health totals, and then the, and then the potential defense reaction, which might not be enough to actually stop anything. So then he blocks with 3 cards. I do play the Ironsong Response. He plays his last Fate Foreseen and does stop the attack, but then I have a Ravenous Rabble from hand, which I can play because I have unconditional Go Again from Quicken, and it does hit a red card, meaning that I'm threatening 4 damage. It's very, very, very risky for my opponent to take 4 damage here. It would put him at 1 life, and then I can kill him immediately with a Steelblade Shunt. Star Freak says, and/or this deck list so we can look at it while listening to your commentary. Yeah, I don't have the exact deck list from this tournament available. I actually should have saved it, but I think I just like made updates to the same listing on I think I just made updates to the same listing on what's it called? FabDB. Like I just updated the same thing that I had earlier. So sorry about that, guys. I don't think that I have the specific build that I'm running there, but the one in my Evolution of a Warrior decklist post, the updated one is, I think it's basically that, except that it's -3, or I'm sorry, except that it's -2 blue Warrior's Valor, +2 blue out for Bloods. Okay, so my opponent ends up blocking with that last point of armor that he has on his Scabskin Leathers, goes down to 2 life. That means that he's not in range to die to a single Steelblade Shunt, and it also means that his Skullcap is now blocking 2, and my Skullcap is now disabled. There is still a risk that I would get a double Shunt or something, but that's not what I have in my hand here. However, I do, once again, have a strong aggressive turn. You know, I can come in here with the Spoils of War. You know, I can pitch blue, Spoils of War, and then play an E-Strike afterwards. Repost 5 says, are you running red shunt for Brute? No, I am not. I don't like red shunts except against Warrior and Guardian. Against Brute, I drop one of my 2 potions for a 3rd blue shunt, and I do put in the Springboard Somersaults, but I do not run red shunt for Brute. I think Shunt is not as good against Brute as it is in some other matchups, because if they intimidate your hand and you don't have Tunic charged up, you don't have anything you can use to pay for Shunt. And the fact that it costs something is more of a downside there than in other matchups. Also, the red Shunt is good at blocking big weapon attacks, but usually if a Brute is doing big weapon attacks, it's because they're buffed by Barraging Beatdown, and you would quite possibly want to be blocking with multiple cards anyway, depending on which beatdown they used or how many. Though if they do like a blue beatdown and they're coming in for 6, and you block it with just a red Shunt and block the full thing without the without needing to stop the beatdown effect, that'd be pretty cool. So, you know, maybe I should test that out, but that's not the way that I play it right now. Okay, so my opponent blocks 8 there, so that's an overblock to prevent me from getting in with an attack reaction, but I'm actually fine with that because my next play is going to be an E-Strike 7, and this is a huge hit that is itself going to merit a big block, and I'm really threatening my opponent now, and I'm feeling pretty good about this situation. Even though I'm really low, I'm exerting so much threat that he's having to block heavily, and he actually is going to block with 2 cards. And so this is 7 damage though, so it is going to put him at 1 life unless he blocks with his Tunic as well. So he's thinking about it, you know. And he's, I think he's conflicted. You know, you can see his hand moving. It moves to the Tunic, it moves back. If he goes to 1 life, I can kill him in 1 hit with a blue Shunt. But if he blocks with his Tunic, he loses the energy that he had stored up, and it's going to put him in a more vulnerable position for the future as well. So he's, I don't know, it's a tough call here. I think personally I probably would do it, but I'm not 100%. It might also depend on if he has healing. Like if he has a, you know, if that card in his arsenal is a Tome of Fyendal, for instance, he might be in a spot where he can decide that he's going to take the hit and then use Tunic for Tome to heal up outside of Shunt range on the next turn, give him another card to put in arsenal. Wouldn't be optimal, but it would probably be better. I think that if you have that option for the healing, then taking the healing is going to be better than blocking with the Tunic. He doesn't block with the Tunic and he's at 1 life. So then I am going to draw up. I don't have a Steelblade Shut in my hand, so I'm not threatening the 1-hit kill, and he just passes, just draws a new hand. Okay, so now I'm thinking about what I have here. I do see that Springboard Somersault, which is a very nice card to have in this situation, for potentially going in arsenal and fending off an attack from him, but at the same time, it's also probably my best pitch card here, because if I pitch the Springboard Somersault, I'll have 2 energy, I can swing Dawnblade for 6, and then I can still potentially use that Singing Steelblade that I have in my hand. Whereas if I pitch the Singing Steelblade, I wouldn't have any attack reaction available. So even though that Springboard Somersault would be great on defense here, the fact that it can pitch for more than 1, unlike some of the, unlike, you know, Sink Below or Fate Foreseen Red, which can also block for 4, but they only pitch for 1. The Springboard Somersault here is kind of fueling my aggression, and that's one of the reasons that I really like Springboard Somersault. You know, if that Springboard Somersault were a red Shunt, this would have been kind of a weaker turn in terms of what offense I could put out. Though I think in this case, a red Shunt would have been better in that it would threaten an instant kill on him if he doesn't have any healing. So right now I'm coming in for 6 damage and he blocks for 3. You know, that's a fine situation for me. And, you know, maybe he's going to block with more stuff. Maybe he is going to play a defense reaction, but you know, I'm certainly not going to play anything when my attack is currently killing him. You know, he has to just, you know, wait and show me. I like the other cool thing about running that blue shunt is that because you want to pitch it early for the energy, and then you get it later on, just from a normal draw, then you can be in a situation where because you pitched it, you're going to draw it later on when the one damage from it might be more important and might be, you know, potentially threatening a kill. My opponent, I believe, is once again kind of in a conundrum about what the best way to defend here is, and that is one of the strengths of Warrior. Yeah, so he was just thinking about how to block, and he goes for a gigantic block here. He actually blocks this for 10, and this is a really good play from him because I do have that Singing Steelblade in hand, so I could have used that Singing Steelblade and gone up to 10 by finding a red attack reaction if I still have one left. So he blocks 10, which shields him from that. But now I have Iron Song Determination in hand and Overpower, so potentially I'm threatening, you know, something massive here. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I also have that red hit and run that I put in my arsenal, so I could do a hit and run and Iron Song Determination turn. This is another reason, you know, I was mentioning pitching Shunt and having it come back later in a good time. Pitching Iron Song Determination early on, also a good move, because when you pitch that Iron Song Determination, it's going to come into your deck later on when your opponent is going to have their armor and their defense reactions depleted, and it's going to give you a much better opportunity to get the kill. So I actually have this Twinning Blade here, so I can play the hit and run, go in with Iron Song Determination, and even if my opponent stops it completely, I can play the Twinning Blade and come in for a second swing. So there's Hit and Run, there's Iron Song Determination. So I'm now, my Dawnblade's going to be Strength 4 with Go Again and Overpower. And then my opponent actually concedes the game at this point. He just concedes because he realizes that I'm going to be able to get him. Technically, it's possible that he could have stopped it if he had he could have used a single card block plus Tunic to stop the Iron Song Determination. But I had the Singing Steelblade in hand to give me more damage, which would have killed him because he doesn't have a defense reaction in Arsenal. And then even if he did somehow stop that, I could have played the Twinning Blade and come in for a second swing. So that is the game, and I end up prevailing there. My opponent is out of juice. He did have some reckless swings in his deck. I think he was trying to see how far down they were there. But they were not available here at the time when he most needed them. So I end up taking the win, and I believe that this win is going to get me into the elims of this tournament. I think that was the last round of Swiss, and it was I believe it was 4 rounds of Swiss cut to top 4. And so I went 3-1 in Swiss with a win against Brute, a win against Wizard, a win against another Warrior, and a loss against Guardian. And that should be enough to get me into the top 4. And yeah, so that was the end of Swiss for this event. And unfortunately, guys, I have to tell you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the semifinals game, the top 4 game that I played for this event, I believe the recording was damaged or did not work properly. And because of that, I am not going to be able to show you guys that game, which is unfortunate. You know, I would certainly prefer to have that available, but unfortunately, that one was messed up. However, I do have some good news, which is that I did win that game, and because I won that game, I did make it to the finals of this tournament, and I do have the finals game recorded. And I believe that is going to be my broadcast on Thursday. So on Thursday late afternoon, early evening, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, I am going to be streaming my recording of the finals of this tournament, which was I will give you a setup for that. So in the semifinals, I won. And my opponent with the Warrior, where we had the kind of crazy game earlier, ended up facing against my opponent who had played Guardian. So it was Warrior versus Guardian, and I had beaten him in the Swiss rounds, but it was very close. And that was the game. I have the VOD up. I don't want to spoil the ending because it was really abnormal, but I did win that game. But I also only had. At the end of the game, I had 1 card in Arsenal, and I was completely fatigued out. No cards in deck, no cards in hand, but I had exactly what I needed to take the win. However, that opponent won his other games and was then put in for the semifinals against the opponent who was playing Guardian and who beat me earlier. I was worried about facing that Guardian in the finals because I don't feel that I have a very good understanding of the Guardian matchup. You know, our previous game was close, but it was definitely a difficult game for me. And I had at this time not made some other changes where I was playing. I went to a second copy of Remembrance instead of, I think, the third red hit and run. That's another change that I made. And because I hadn't done that yet, I wasn't as sure that I was going to be able to play a potentially long game against Guardian effectively. However, I did find myself in a fortunate spot because my previous opponent, the Warrior, defeated that Guardian in the semifinals. It was a very close game, but apparently he won. You know, it was late in the game, both players low on life. He did some attack, and I think maybe the opponent overblocked by 3, but he actually had 2. But the Warrior actually had 2 Razor Reflexes in hand and played both of them, got in over that, and got the kill. Or maybe it wasn't an overblock, but it was just, you know, 2 Razor Reflexes to hit for 6 or something. I did not watch that game. I think there was a recording of it that was also unfortunately corrupted or incomplete. But I know that he got in with a double Razor Reflex at the end in a very close game. So that player advanced to the finals. I advanced to the finals, and I will be streaming on Thursday, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. I'm going to be streaming that finals game between me and that other Warrior player. And, you know, we will see who prevailed. We know it's going to be a Warrior victory in the tournament, but we'll see whether or not it is myself or Miko beat on Thursday. Or I guess you'll see. I already know who won. But yeah, that's going to do it for this stream, guys. Thanks to On It Fab Foundry, who you can actually see there in the chat, for organizing this event. You know, this was sponsored by Fab Foundry. It was a lot of fun. And there's going to be more stuff coming from them in the future, so stay tuned for that. And thanks to you guys for watching, and we'll be coming back. The scheduled stream on Thursday will be the finals of this tournament from my recording, and I will also probably do some unscheduled streams of games from other events or just pickup games. I can also tell you that I have a scheduled stream on Saturday. The exact time is unknown, but it's going to be Saturday morning, Flesh and Blood. There's a tournament being played online. I believe it's organized by a store from the Netherlands. A classic constructed tournament being played. And I said that they reached out to me and I agreed that I'm going to stream the top cut of that event. So that'll probably be 2 games. I'll stream one semifinals game and one finals game, I believe, at that time. So that should be pretty exciting. So stay tuned for the conclusion of this tournament on Thursday, and then me live streaming the conclusion of a different tournament on Saturday, plus any incidental stuff that might come up. All right, that's going to do it, guys. Thanks again for watching, and we will catch you later.